Hello, sixth grade. Today we're going to talk a little bit about equivalent fractions. So here you can see that we have a rectangle that's broken into some equal parts. And so some of those parts are green and some are white. And if we wanted to name the amount of the original, the whole rectangle, this is the whole rectangle. If we wanted to name the amount that was green, we would call it 1, 2, 3 out of 4 parts, and we call that 3/4, right? Now, what happens though if we change the number of equal parts? Let's say we drew a line like this. Now, I didn't change the green, right? I don't have a green highlighter in my hand, but we still have, so we have the same amount of green, but now we have a different fractional amount that is green. Can you tell me what that is? Well, now you can see that the number of equal parts are 8. 6 of them are highlighted green, so we would call that 6/8. Now 6/8 is equivalent to 3/4 because it really represents the same amount, just 2 different ways, 2 different names for it. Okay, and we can do that in fractions. We can name the same amount in more than one way. Now, if you looked at these 2 fractions mathematically, there's a relationship that exists between the numerators and between the denominators. So if you doubled this denominator, or this numerator, you get this numerator, and if you double this denominator, you get this denominator. And that's the rule of equivalent fractions, that if you can multiply the same number by the numerator and the denominator, and this next fraction that you come up with when you do that is an equivalent fraction to what you started with. Now we can also do that with division. So say we did this. So now we still have the same amount of green, right? That has not changed, but what has changed are the number of equal parts and the number of those parts that are green. So if you count the number of parts, I see there are 4, 8, 12, 16 parts. So that would be the denominator, because the number of parts would be the number of equal parts would be the denominator. And then how many of those parts are green? There are 4, 8, 12 of them. 12/16 is a way that we could name the amount of green now based on the number of equal parts there are. Now, we had said originally that this was 3/4. So we know then that 3/4 is equivalent to 12/16 because it's the same amount of green, just divided differently, right? Now, how does 12, we want to again look at the relationship between the numerators and the denominators. How does 12 relate to 3? Well, you could divide it by 4 to get to 3. The same thing holds true now with 16 divided by 4 gives you 4. So we can use multiplication or division to help us find equivalent fractions. All right, so now I want you to think of 2 equivalent fractions to 4/12 and 2 equivalent fractions to 5/15. Pause the video and write those out, please. Okay, so I could use multiplication or division on 4/12. Now I can always use multiplication to find equivalent fractions, but division only works as if there's a common factor between 4 and 12, which there is. Now, so today I'm just going to really concentrate on using division to find equivalent fractions, okay? Now I know that I could divide 4 and 12 by 2 because 2 is a common factor. So that means an equivalent fraction would be 2/6. Now, when you look at 2/6, you might say, well, there's still a common factor between 2 and 6 here, and that would be 2. So now we could divide by 2 and divide by 6 and get 1/3. Now, if a fraction is equivalent to 2/6, and if 2/6 is equivalent to 4/12, that means this 1/3 is also equivalent to 4/12. Right? Because anytime you have an equivalent fraction, it's equivalent to every equivalent fraction for that particular fraction. Okay? Now, could we have come up with 1/3 differently? We could have. We could have started here and divided by 4, divided by a factor of 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1, and 12 divided by 4 would give us 3. So I found 2 equivalent fractions using division. All right, 5/15. Now I want to use division. What could I divide by? Well, I have to find a common factor of both 5 and 15, which would be 5. 5 divided by 5 would give us 1, and 15 divided by 5 would give us 3. So 1/3 is equivalent to 5/15. I'm going to blow your mind for a sec. Are you ready? If this is equivalent to 1/3 and this is equivalent to 1/3, doesn't that mean that 4/12 is equivalent to 5/15? What? 4/12 is equal to 5/15? Well, yes, they are. If they both simplify to 1/3, that means they are equivalent fractions. We'll spend more time talking about that later. Okay, how about 10/12 and 14/20? 10/12, common factor of 2. So if we divide by 2 in the numerator and divide by 2 in the denominator, we get 5/6. Now we could also then use multiplication. We can't use division anymore because there's not another common factor. All right, what about 14/20? Well, I know 2 is a factor of both 14 and 20. That would give us 7/10. And then to find another equivalent fraction, we would have to use multiplication. Okay? But I like the idea of using division because of what we're talking about today. And what we're talking about is simplest form. Fractions are in simplest form when the numerator and denominator have no common factors other than 1. And if we use the greatest common factor to divide the numerator and denominator, then we will end up with simplest form, which is something we're going to want to do a lot of. And so that's why we're talking about that today. Okay. All right, so here are 2 fractions that I would like you to write in simplest form. Okay, so 8 and 12. I know they have a common factor of 2, and if we use 2, that's fine to find an equivalent fraction, but it won't give us simplest form because there is a greater common factor, and that would be 4. 8 divided by 4, and 12 divided by 4 would give us 2/3. Okay, now if you use 2, you would have gotten, not 6, you would have gotten 4/6, which is fine if you want an equivalent fraction. But if you want simplest form, you have to use the greatest common factor. Okay, 6/8, greatest common factor would be 2 in this case, and that would give you a fraction of 3/4. All right, what about these two? 9/12 and 28/35. Pause the video, simplify them, and come back. Is this what you got? That's what I got. Greatest common factor here is 3. Greatest common factor here, 7. All right, so your assignment today is to simplify some fractions. It's on a Google slide. Give it your best shot. Use greatest common factor, okay? Good luck.